Can now confirm we're live and the meeting can commence.
Okay, welcome everybody and thank you for attending this meeting today, and I hope you're all well during this very difficult time. What I'll do now is move on to explain how the meeting will work. During the meeting, all microphones and cameras will be switched off with the exception of myself as chair of the meeting and any presenting officers other than as directed by the meeting facilitator. Should anyone leave the meeting for any reason, the meeting will continue unless the meeting is no longer quorate at that time. Please ensure that any items relating to personal, private, confidential or exempt information are not visible through your camera or screen sharing until any press and public have been excluded from the meeting. Please be advised that all proceedings of the meeting will be recorded and broadcast on YouTube Live for members of the public to see. Please ensure that when you are not speaking, your microphone remains on mute and your camera is switched off. If you wish to speak at any point, please turn on your camera and raise your hand, or alternatively indicate via the chat function. The meeting facilitator will then unmute your microphone and invite you to speak at the appropriate time. You should then click to confirm that you wish to unmute your microphone and then state your question or make your comment. Please do not try to unmute yourself. The meeting facilitator will do this for you. There will be a slight delay and then you will be prompted to allow yourself to be unmuted. And at that stage, please select the blue button that says unmute now to do so. When I request you all to approve or note an item, I will ask you to turn on your camera and the meeting facilitator will then unmute everyone. If you have any issues, this will be your opportunity to raise them and silence will be taken as approval. I can now confirm that the following members are in attendance at this meeting this afternoon and all members present can hear and be heard. First of all, myself, Councillor Brian Kenny, Councillor Doreen Knight, Councillor Jan Grace, Councillor Edna Finneran, Councillor Linda Maloney, Councillor Bruce Berry, Councillor Emily Spurrell, Councillor Lynne Thompson and Councillor Paul Tweed. So
Councillor Paul Tweed isn't in attendance as yet. He's got some connectivity problems.
Okay, well hopefully Councillor Tweed will be able to join us over the next few minutes. So we can now proceed to the agenda. As far as I'm aware, we have no apologies from members and that all members relevant are present at the meeting. But if we can record in the minutes that we do have apologies from ACFO Dave Mottram. Can I ask, do we have any declarations of interest that need to be made? No, so I'll assume no. To be admitted onto the agenda. Sorry, I'll call in the chief.
No, Councillor Kane, it was only just to flag up the fact that you'd been muted, so it's been rectified now, so we can continue.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much. Okay, if we carry on then. So there's no declarations of interest. We have no matters of urgency. There are no exempt items other than I understand the last item concerning Heswall Fire Station. If there is a discussion, we will need to exempt a couple of the pages from that particular item. but we'll wait till we get to that one.
Yeah, it's the appendices that are exempt. So should members wish to discuss anything in the content of those appendices, we will close the meeting at that point to discuss further. However, anything outside of that can remain open.
Okay, thanks Ria, thanks very much. So if we move on to the minutes of the last meeting, which I think was the 6th of February 2020, we need to approve the minutes of that meeting. Could members please now turn on their cameras by clicking start video in the bottom left hand corner of the screen, and the meeting facilitator will now unmute everyone to provide you with an opportunity to raise any issues with regards to the minutes. If you wish to raise anything, please click to confirm you want your microphone to be unmuted and state your comment. If nobody raises any issues, then the minutes will be taken as approved. I'm just checking now. I don't think anybody's indicated that they wish to speak. So in that case, can the minutes of the last meeting be approved, please? Yeah, okay. So the minutes have been agreed. Thank you. Could you all now please turn off your cameras again? Thank you very much. Okay, so if we now move on through the agenda, the next agenda item is agenda item number 3, and I believe the Chief Fire Officer will be introducing this item.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you.
And the purpose of this report is to provide members with the draft Equality, Diversity and Inclusion annual report, which contains an update on progress against our equality, diversity actions and our ED&I objectives for 2017 through 20. And the recommendation that members consider the report and approve the attached report for publication onto the website. And I'll go on to explain the purpose of the report is to demonstrate Merseyside Fire and Rescue Authority's compliance with the Equality Act 2010 general duty, and to update stakeholders on the key outcomes which have been delivered through the period. And again, members will be aware that the Equalities Act states that the exercise of our functions, public authorities must have due regard to the need to eliminate unlawful discrimination, harassment and victimisation, and other conduct prohibited by the Act, advance equality of opportunity between people who share protected characteristics and those who do not, and foster good relations between people who share protected characteristics and those who do not. And in order for public authorities to demonstrate that they are meeting this duty, there are a number of specific duties which require public bodies, including Merseyside Fire and Rescue Authority, to carry out. And that is notably to publish the information, to show their compliance, and which will be released onto the website. And that's done on at least an annual basis, and to set and publish equality objectives at least every 4 years. I'll then move the members on to the actual report itself. I'll pick out some highlights of the report, which is contained within page 17 of the foreword, which in supporting that duty, we've started to continue to develop our diversity networks, and they've now become an integral part of the work that we do. They're championed by a senior officer across the service, and those networks are being encouraged to comment on our policies and procedures and the way we conduct our business, and that is then fed directly back into the decisions that are made by the authority through the reporting process. We've also, during the period of the last 12 months, developed bespoke equality, diversity and inclusion training, which was originally delivered face-to-face. More latterly, it's been delivered via Teams and Zoom, and that has allowed us to continue to ensure that our staff are aware of the duties placed on us, and equally they are able to ensure that we are meeting that statutory responsibility. And we've also continued to work on some of the key aspects of the work for the authority around positive action and recruitment. Members will be aware we continue to recruit, particularly from a firefighting perspective, 60 individuals this year and into the next, and the importance and the significance of recruiting through positive action is clear and apparent. We've further developed our work around knowing our communities, so we are able to ensure that the activities that we undertake as the Fire and Rescue Service on behalf of the authority, are focusing on tackling the inequalities that exist, particularly across Merseyside. And we've already seen that with some of the activities that have taken place around home safety and really focusing in on the socially deprived areas of Merseyside. And again, authority members have supported the development of community impact fund, which will allow firefighters to discharge their local responsibilities with some additional funding that they can direct to their community safety plans. And then finally, we are continuing to work around that improved aspects of the inequalities that exist through the Home Fire Safety Check agenda. Again, members will touch on it, it's contained within the report, but if I draw you just attention to page 21, which details the equality objectives, which remain unchanged as part of this annual report. Equality objective 1, to create a strong, cohesive organisation that is positive about rising to the futures that we and challenges that we face. Equality objective 2, ensure the people from diverse communities receive equitable services that meet their needs. Equality objective 3, reducing fire and other incidents amongst the vulnerable protected groups. Equality objective 4, to ensure that staff are better equipped to the delivery of their roles while showing due regard to the points referenced earlier. And equality objective 5, to continue to aspire to achieving excellence or the equivalent in the Fire and Rescue Authority's framework around equality. They remain our objectives for the forthcoming year, unless challenged or altered by the authority on the basis of the kind of comments that are received. And then if I take you through how we've sought to address those equality objectives, again, I will pick out some of the highlights from the report, which I believe to be highlights anyway. If I take you to equality objective 1, which is that strong, cohesive workforce, I'll pick up two of the key areas. One is the recruitment of female firefighters into the service. Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service has 10.9% of operational staff which are female, which is an increase of 9% from 9% in 2018-19. And in respect of how we compare and contrast with other fire and rescue services, Merseyside at 10.9, the Metropolitan Fire and Rescue Service that are very similar in their makeup and construct. The equivalent is 7.3, and the average across the English Fire and Rescue Service is 6.8. So again, a really positive insight into the number of female firefighters deployed across Merseyside, and everyone in female firefighters is doing an outstanding job. In a similar vein, around the inequalities that exist, we look at ethnicity within the service, and for operational support staff, the percentage of BAME staff are above the population of Merseyside, who currently stands at 5.9% of BAME employees against a Merseyside indicator of 5.5%. And again, on page 27, the inspector report details where Merseyside sit in the percentage point difference between the service's BAME residential population and its BAME firefighters. And again, Merseyside is second only to the Isle of Scilly, which is probably a bit of a misnomer in the first instance in regards to that representation from our BAME firefighters. So again, some real positivity in regards to our positive action, which has resulted in those outcomes. I'll also draw you to page 37, again, from a positive around the flexible working arrangements that were put in place across Merseyside. We have some quite robust policies there to assure ourselves that we're meeting the demands placed on individuals dependent on their circumstances. Some are, childcare issues, some are related to caring for elderly parents, particularly poignant at this moment in time during the COVID period. There's been a total of 15 requests for flexible working, all of which were accepted by the panel. Of this, 10 were from women and 5 were from men. But again, just provides you with that reassurance, members, that we are meeting the demands that are placed on our staff and around the flexibility that we are able to afford. I move then through onto page 38-39, which talks about the gender pay gap. And again, as a comparator, the 2019 gender pay gap nationally is at 17.3% for the mean gender pay gap. If you look across this organisation, Merseyside Fire and Rescue Authority, the mean gender pay gap is 11.4%, and that is slightly lower than it was previously, which was at 11.7%, so indicating we are going in the correct direction. And again, if you look at then the page across, so page 40, which talks about the median gender pay gap, again, the median gender pay gap is 5.16% against an average UK median of 8.9% during 2018. Again, recognising the fact that we are starting to address the inequalities around pay that had previously existed. The report then moves on to talk about some of the work that we've done under Equality Objective 2 around the home fire safety approaches, and members will be aware of decisions made previously that not only we would tackle the inequalities that exist around age, we would also start to tackle inequalities that exist around levels of deprivation, recognising that during austere times, individuals were choosing to put food on the table rather than smoke alarms up in their properties, and we're seeking now to address that through really targeted around the lower socio-economic areas of Merseyside and the provision of smoke alarms free of charge for those individuals. And then there's examples within the report of some specifics around support and working with the Roma community. Equality Objective 3 talks about reductions again in fires and really targeting on the vulnerability factors, and there's examples there of where we've worked with dementia teams and smoking cessation. And then we move on to Objective 4, which is around ensuring our staff are better equipped. And as I said previously, our staff are in the process of receiving equality, diversity and inclusion refresher training, and also training in relation to unconscious bias, given that was a reference within the inspectorate report previously. And there's reference to the disciplinary and staff grievances as is required as part of our reporting processes, which I'm happy to take any questions on. And then as we move into Objective 4, which talks about that, some of the kind of the equalities framework and that aspiration to be the best fire and rescue service in the country in regard to ED&I, and then it moves on to talking about some of the examples of the work that we've done to ensure that through the remainder of the report. I'll probably pause at that point, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions around anything I've said or the component parts of the report.
Okay, thank you, Chief. A note from the chat box that Councillor Spurrell would like to ask a question. So can the facilitator please unmute? Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Spurrell.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Phil. I always ask questions about this, but it's always because you give us so much to talk about. And I have to say I'm very, very impressed at the kind of commitment and the work that goes into the equality diversity stuff. There's just loads being done, and I think that's really great. I went to one of the staff network events before kind of everything started locking down, and that was really impressive, and you could see the work and that had gone into it, so that was really good. So I really, really welcome this. Every time it comes, there's always lots of good examples. I have got a few questions. If you bear with me, I've got a couple, and then I might have some more after that. But the first was about the flexible working. So obviously, really positive story that you've been able to be so flexible for people who need that flexibility. Presumably, there might be further changes as COVID is, a lot of people are still working from home, I imagine, and those kind of things. So just give us an update on how that might develop moving forward, taking into account the current situation. I had a second question about the pay gap. In terms of the kind of, one of the challenges is around women in senior roles. And obviously that's because they just haven't kind of worked their way up yet. And so I just wanted to know if you could clarify what is the process. So is it a case if you have to work so many years in so many different roles to get experience, or is it more straightforward of if you can pass the interview, demonstrate the skills, that kind of thing? How does that process work, just so I can get a better sense of how that happens? And then my last question was about the home fire safety checks. And obviously we've got a really good example of the ethnicity data and the equality data in terms of where we do the visits and where we do the checks. And I suspect the answer to this is, I don't know the answer to it, but do we have anything around where they've been refused? So are there any particular groups that are refusing the officers when the fire officers when they turn up on the door? And is there any patterns there that we need to be aware of in terms of people not being trusting of the fire officers for whatever reason?
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, look, they're all excellent questions, Emily, as I would expect, to be fair. So I'll take them as they fall in. So the first one in relating to flexible working policies, I suppose to some degree we've always had them in place. I suppose what we're now looking to draw in, and it will come back to the authority probably in the next few weeks, really, at the next opportunity, which is the creation of an agile working policy, which is slightly different than the family-friendly working arrangements that we will put in place where you're providing care in some way, shape or form. And that agile working will probably look a little different, and we have learned from COVID-19, because of the fact that a lot of our staff have now, or our period in time, certainly went and worked from home, and they were able to do so pretty well. We are also looking at how we can kind of facilitate that in the longer term, and that might not necessarily be home working. That's why I haven't used home working. It may be more agile working. It may be utilising some of our space on stations, a little closer to people's home, and so on and so forth. So there will be a policy document coming back to the authority, which will have a support and instruction, which will detail some of the things which are important to us about maintaining our effectiveness and our efficiency, but also recognising that maybe we can do that in a little bit more of an agile way. So probably by the next authority meeting, that report and that paper will be coming to yourselves for acceptance and acknowledgement. The second one, which relates to, I suppose, the gender pay gap, and it is related to senior roles to a degree. But I would also point out the fact, though, is because we've recruited in large numbers more recently, and our newest recruits into the service are on development rates of pay, which is a national arrangement, because we're bringing more female firefighters in, and they are kind of compared and contrast with long-standing probably male firefighters, as we're starting to challenge the kind of the dynamic there and the makeup of the organisation. So there's a little bit of lead in, so that will soon change as they move from development into competent roles. That takes a little bit of time, and it's linked into the apprenticeship standard for firefighter, which is a 24-month apprenticeship standard, and at that point they will move into a competent firefighting role. That said, the progression from there through then isn't predicated on any length of time. Sometimes firefighters may have a view that they have to have served X amount of years before they are ready for progression. I suppose it's like in any employment, people like to be comfortable and confident in the role. And again, we're trying to suggest that, and again, I think there's probably evidence to support this statement. Male firefighters are happy to just push on and I'll see how I get on. Female firefighters want to be absolutely assured that they are ready and capable of doing the job. And there's a little bit of work for us to do there. We know we've got a female station manager who has progressed to that level, but we know there's more that we can do. And we've got a large group of female firefighters who've come through the service more recently, who have every confidence are equipped to do senior roles in this organisation. And we have just taken away some of the prohibitors around the gateway process, which means people can enter the gateway at any particular point in time. So rather than it opening up on an annual basis, they can move in when they think they're ready, or fun enough, probably more importantly, when we think they're ready, because there's probably a better indicator of when we are happy to move someone through. And sometimes they're a little reluctant to themselves, and they put a ceiling on their own progression in the first instance. And so we're working hard in that respect around accelerated progression. And that's not just for female firefighters, that's anyone within the organisation who has got the skills and attributes that we would want to progress rapidly through the service. So you don't have to have served any length of time. Our firefighters in Merseyside get a lot more exposure than most do across the country. So competent in firefighting is probably easily secured. Then it's managerial competencies, and members will know we've got an extensive amount of development support for those individuals who want to progress through. So there is a little bit more work for us to do, absolutely, particularly around our female firefighters. But definitely that is work which is in progress now. And again, particularly Emily, for myself, and extend this to any other members of the authority, if you've got any thoughts or ideas about how we can improve that kind of progression, then we're more than happy to take them on board and build them into our processes, and equally happy for for anyone to come and take a look at what we've got currently and see whether there's things that we can do maybe a little differently to support that development. And then finally, in relation to those staff who have refused, this is going back a number of years now, but we sought to introduce bilingual advocates, people who could speak a multitude of languages, people who represented our communities a little bit better than necessarily I would. And as a result of that, that broke down a whole raft of barriers and obstacles getting across the threshold into people's homes. However, on the basis of this question, I will go back and review that based on the data that we've got to see whether there is any communities which are either new or emergent, where there's a reluctance for them to allow the fire and rescue service into their homes. And I'll caveat that within the context of COVID, because all communities are a little bit more reticent to let us across the threshold. I'm sure over the period of time that will dissipate, but it will be something that we will revisit Council Borough to see whether there's more work we need to do in a particular community. And if there is, and the opportunity avails itself, then we'll probably do something akin to what we've done previously, which is look to have representation in some way, shape or form from that community to allow us access into those homes. Hope that it sufficiently answers your questions.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Grace would like to make a comment, please. Councillor Grace, if you can put your camera on, please, and if the facilitator can unmute the microphone. Thank you.
Just to say thank you for such an in-depth and impressive report. I just thought I'd take the opportunity to report back to members from the LGA Equality and Diversity meeting I attended virtually in July. It was actually presentations from Jagta Singh, who's National Advisor for the Asian Fire Service, and Nicola Green, who's Legal Director for Capstick Solicitors. Essentially, it was a huge amount of background knowledge about Section 158 and Section 159, and there was a big discussion afterwards as well, which was also very useful, and they actually sent the link to us last week, so that will help with the notes. We've got meetings penciled in for October and November, and I was just going to say I'm willing to perhaps put a presentation together for members just to let them know of some of the things that are being discussed, because I've already found it a huge learning curve. And as I say, Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service is visibly doing such a good job.
Thanks, Councillor Grace. And just to add to that, Chair, if I may, Councillor Grace referenced Jagtar Singh. We're going to ask the Asian Fire and Rescue Services Association to come in and kind of peer review some of the work that we are currently embarking on. And they're scheduled to come in the next month or so to just take a look at what we do, how we do it, and whether there's any areas that we could improve on.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Thanks, Councillor Grace. Okay, are there any other members who either want to make a comment or ask a question on this agenda item, please? It doesn't appear so. So in that case, can the committee agree the recommendation in relation to agenda item 3, which is on page 9 of the agenda? Yep. Can that be approved? Yeah. Councillor Berry, did you want to speak?
No.
No. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Right. So can the committee agree the recommendation in relation to agenda item 3, please?
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. That's been agreed. Thank you very much. So we move on now to agenda item 4 on the question of service delivery plan for 2020 to 21, April to June report. And this, I think, is on page 77 of the papers you've received. So again, I'll ask the Chief to introduce, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies. You would normally get Jackie Sutton, who would take you through the performance data and the key areas of success. However, it will be me this occasion. So the purpose of the report is to request that members scrutinise the performance against the objectives and the performance targets outcomes are set out in our service delivery plan for the period of the plan, which is 2019-20 through April to June, and the recommendation that members approve the attached report for publication onto the website. And again, members will be familiar. We go through the functional planning process. We include the service delivery plans, the station plans. The information is available, and then we look at some of the key performance indicators which would affect the public in regards to the work that we undertake, and in specific reference to their safety. I don't intend to go through the service delivery plan, which is contained on page 81, through, other than just to kind of pick up on some of the kind of key bits, which are contained subsequently in the service delivery plan appendix, which is on page 109, which is the headlines in relation to performance. And broadly, the performance is strong. There are a couple of areas which I would identify for members in relation to the attendance of fires. Fires is primarily green across the board, suggesting our performance is ahead of schedule and better than previously, and certainly the previous year. What we have had, which I draw members' attention to, we have had 4 fatal fire deaths in a very short period of time, which reflected the period that we were in lockdown through COVID. We did ask questions nationally whether there was a correlation between the number of fires which were being experienced nationally and the number of fires that we were experiencing in Merseyside. However, there wasn't that correlation with COVID-19 and the lockdown period. But I know one of the fire deaths particularly related directly to someone burning refuge, which then spread from the garden to the property, and subsequently that individual died, unfortunately. And that individual, in my view, wouldn't have been burning off rubbish ordinarily. And so I think there was a link to COVID-19 and the circumstances of lockdown. However, we have had 4 fire deaths over that period, which is, if I put that into comparison with 4 fire deaths the previous year and the year before that, in a very short period of time, probably within 3 weeks, we had those instances. Fortunately, that has now sort of diminished. But the number of fire deaths has increased, but broadly fires in the broader sense have remained under target and performing higher and better. I would also draw members' attention to the total number of special service calls attended. You'll see that this is for quality assurance. It's for us to review and maintain cognizance of. And the number of calls that we've responded to over the period has increased to special services, and members will be aware that special services can look and feel like we are supporting other services. So the likes of North West Ambulance Service during the period would have required us to attend probably more significant instance, and as a result of that, there's been an increase in the number of special services. So we may well have gone to properties to ensure we were able to gain access to a particularly vulnerable individual who had requested the support of the ambulance, was unable to get out of their property, as an example. And then the other thing to draw members' attention to of particular note is in relation to sickness absence for the service. Obviously, in the context of COVID, it would be expected that sickness absence levels would have increased significantly over the period. However, it's the opposite of that, to be fair, with our sickness absence levels being at 3.11% in comparison with our target of 4%. And if we compared that with last year, when we didn't have COVID, that was at 3.63%. And if we were to remove any COVID-related sickness absence from the statistics that we're providing, that would be as low as 2.54%. And the reason why I've referenced that in kind of some of the highlights is the fact that our staff have made themselves available throughout the pandemic. We have referenced previously about people working from home, and that's absolutely what's happened for some of our headquarters staff. But those staff who have been delivering risk-critical training have maintained at our training centre, and those staff obviously who've been on the front line in both prevention protection roles, but equally in operational roles, have done so right throughout the COVID period. So the fact that our sickness absence levels are so low is testimony to their kind of commitment to the people of Merseyside. And I'll probably conclude at that point, Chair, just to referencing the functional plan, the service delivery plans, and some of the key performance for the service and the authority over that period. And again, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chief. If anybody's got any questions or comments, could you please switch on your camera and raise your hand or make a comment in the chat box. So, Councillor Spurrell, would you like to speak?
Yes, me again. Hi. I just wanted to ask two things. The first is, it's the one that I ask every time we get this data, and I do think it would be really helpful if we could put some of the stats in relation to other forces. So particularly during COVID, for example, did other fire services, did they see the same increase in terms of deliberate fires in dwellings, for example? Did they see a spike? It's just useful to see whether it's something that's been particularly bad here, or has it been something that's been reflected, particularly when you're dealing with something like COVID where nobody knows what's the norm. And that kind of information is helpful. And just specifically on that point around the deliberate dwelling fires, and obviously given the number of fatalities we've had, has there been any response to that in terms of community advice and reminding people not to burn things in your house, or if you are, what the safety precautions are? Have we done the kind of comms and response to that?
Yeah, okay. So in relation to the compare and contrast, so the benchmarking data, yeah, that is available. It's difficult to get out of the governmental incident recording system as effective as we would want to, and hence the reason why we would deal with our data. But that doesn't mean we don't keep trying. So we will seek to provide that little bit of benchmarked information. What you can pick up is, at a national level, given some of the lead responsibilities we've had over the period, I'm probably better cited than most around the impacts of the number of calls that we've received and how they compare with others. So in relation to, and they are accidental dwelling fires, I would hasten to add, they're not necessarily deliberate fires that have resulted in fire deaths. But we are, and there's probably a couple of other services, we are a little bit of an outlier in relation to the numbers. Because I was thinking that this may have been a trend, and a lot of services were seeing an increase in fire deaths over the lockdown period. That didn't bear true, and so we are just considering that from a Merseyside perspective. And if you look at the deliberate fires, again, we have probably more deliberate fires than most services, and we do a massive amount of work to reduce that, and we've seen significant progress in that respect. But again, I draw you back into some of the things which COVID has demonstrated, which is those areas where there's inequalities exist. Suffer more fires, they suffer more deaths related to COVID, and so on and so forth. So a real focus in the broader sense for Merseyside Fire and Rescue Services is how we can tackle the inequalities that exist, and some of those are health inequalities that exist across Merseyside, and how we can work with our partners to ensure that by tackling their priorities, we are actually tackling ours just a little bit more upstream. And the second question, I might have to help me out, Emma.
In terms of the communication and the fact that people were doing more fires at home and things like that, managing rubbish.
Yeah, no, fantastic, thank you. And so in relation to the comms, corporate comms has done an incredible job to really have over the period about picking up on emergency issues and communicate really effectively. So in the first stages, we've seen things like when refuge wasn't getting collected, and people were burning extensively in the back gardens. That counts for that whole raft of false alarm good intent calls that we received. So neighbours were calling us thinking that something was on fire. It was actually neighbours burning garden waste and other things off. We've seen that as a spike early on. We put out a fair amount of communication which sought to recognise the fact that was becoming a bit of a challenge for us. Equally, during the hot weather, so we had a hot May, and you would recognise not just Merseyside but nationally, people were going out into open spaces at that time, and they were setting barbecues up, and they were disposable ones. They were leaving them in situ, and then we were getting a number of related fires as a result of barbecues. And as again, corporate communications have pushed that message through, as we have more recently around vulnerability and isolation of individuals who were shielding and just checking that they were still being looked after by the communities, and also they still had working smoke alarms. So a whole raft of communication has gone out through social media predominantly, but a fair amount has gone up through the old ways of communicating through press and media as well. But an extensive amount of work has been done over the period.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Okay, is there anybody else who'd like to either make a comment or ask a question on this item, please? No. Can I put it to the committee then that you approve the recommendation on page 77 of agenda item 4? Can that be approved?
Agreed.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. That's been agreed then. So we move on to the next item, which is agenda item 5, the Heswall refurbishment project. And this is on page 123 of the written documentation. So again, I'll hand over to the Chief to introduce this item, please.
Thanks. Thank you. I will just be relatively brief and to the point. The purpose of the report is to seek approval for the planned refurbishment and development of Heswall Fire and Rescue Service Station, and the costs are contained within the report, and they are in line with the estate's asset management plans as previously considered by the authority. And the recommendations particularly are that members note the outcome of the formal tendering process, agree to continue with the planned refurbishment of the fire station, note that the scope of the works excludes the following items on the basis of affordability. That's a new mist sprinkler system, new external canopy, and new external storage building, and approve the award of the contract to Novus Property Solutions for the sum of £360,761.62. And that's the scope of the report. I'm happy to take any questions in relation to the tender process or in relation to the appendices itself, Chair, and I'll happy to take any questions that members may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Has anybody got either any comments or questions to raise on this item?
None indicated,
No.
Chair.
Sorry?
There's none indicated, Chair.
No. Okay. In that case, can I put the agenda item 5 to the committee for approval with the recommendation contained on page 123 of the agenda item?
Agreed, Chair.
That agreed? Okay. Right. Thank you very much. Right. I think, unless anybody corrects me, I think that concludes the agenda for today. Can I just say as chair, I want to express my appreciation to everybody for your cooperation. It's not easy having meetings in this sort of format, so I would like to extend my thanks to everybody, including all the staff, for the way the meeting's been conducted this afternoon. I understand that the next meeting is now scheduled for the 2nd of February 2021. It remains to be seen whether we'll be meeting in this format or whether by then we might be able to meet together physically in a room. We'll have to wait and see. But in the meantime, thanks very much again for your cooperation, and I now declare the meeting